Shane, what's up, man?
What's up? Thank you so much for coming on here. Super sick.
Hell yeah, of course, dog. Yeah, I'm stoked to chop it up. Sorry, you got to deal with a little crazy natural light for
No
maybe.
worries,
It's
no
just,
worries at all.
it gets insane in this little room, this little office space. But I don't have any blinds, but it'll be cool. No,
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. I'm here with Ryland of Origami Angel. So thank you so much for being here.
how's it going? Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chop it up.
Hell yeah. Before we jump in, I'm sure anyone watching this channel definitely is familiar with you. But for anyone that's new, could you just give a quick introduction of yourself and the band?
Sure, yeah, I'm Ryland. I'm half of the band Origami Angel. I'm the melodic half and the counterpart to my friend Pat, who is the rhythmic half. We make emo music that has spanned so many different genre shifts in the last 7 years, and we just been playing music through the DIY scene, and now we're just able to keep this rock and roll machine going. Yeah, we're just music makers, and I just view myself as a music maker and one of the luckiest people to be able to do it as my life.
That's so awesome. Going way back to start a little bit. So you and Pat met through a mutual band that happened before Origami, right?
Yeah, so when we met, it was when I was in high school, I was doing a lot of shows just at like weird spaces. And it wasn't even necessarily like DIY scene shows. It was like weird high school shows. Like it was like a
For sure.
completely separate thing. It's just I'm sure if people have any experience with music in the DIY scene and kind of like before you really find your home, you know what I'm talking about, where it's
Oh,
like
absolutely.
this weird like almost like a purgatory between like not real and real. But so I um was always so wanting to be enveloped in the scene that I was down to do whatever. Me and one of my best friends, we would book these shows at this community music space in Riverdale, Maryland, and like once a month we would like get something going, and whether it was a DIY band coming through that we would try to put a show on or just like a local showcase for some of our other homies. One time we tried to book a show in like I want to say like January or December 2015, January 2016. And we had a bunch of bands, and one of them fell through like 3 days before. And then our other homie was like, who we actually all played in a band with, he was like, yo, one of my friends plays in a band. Let's have him come through. And at this time, that band I aforementioned that I was in, me and my best friend and our homie who suggested this other band, we were looking for a drummer. So the band that he invited, they come up, they play a ripping set. We see Pat drum, me and the one homie who was booking the shows, Jacob. We go up to him after and we're like, dude, like we just got a show offer on Wednesday. This is a Sunday night or something. And we're like, are you down to come practice at Jacob's parents' house Monday and then play a show with us in DC on Wednesday? And Pat was like, F it, I'm down. Let's do it. And then from there, it was like we met and we played a bunch of shows with that band. The band kind of fizzled out, and I was like, well, I want to keep doing, music. And I think that we have a good little relationship here. So that was the start of Origami Angel. It was kind of just like we want to sound like kind of emo band or something. And then yeah, but that old band was Idle Empire. We had a good like year there with Pat in it, and then we ended up fizzling out as most bands from high school do. No one really stays in their first band forever. And we ended up starting Origami Angel, which is, a lot of people also don't stay in their second band forever, but we're 7 years deep and feels like it's just the beginning. So I'm really, really stoked that this worked out and that me and him could do it together.
That's so incredible. As a follow-up to that, you said your first band had a different name. At what point did you guys switch to the whole Origami Angel thing, and how did you guys come up with that?
Yeah, there was um since the in that first band Idle Empire, I was more like a lead guitarist. I wasn't writing all the songs. It was kind of like a half and half type thing, or like parts we would write stuff together. But I had all these other songs that I was working on, which had a very clearly different aesthetic, and it was like a lot of the material from our first two EPs, and it was very very emo coded. The other band was very indie rock, and so when me and Pat decided to start working on this stuff, I had another band name that never ended up really working because a lot of other bands had a similar name, and I was like, it's not that cool. And then actually I was hanging um back home after one semester of college. I came back. I only did three. I was in and out pretty quickly. It was not for me. But one semester was over. Winter break. I was hanging with my homie Jacob from Idle Empire. And I was like, dude, I got these songs. We're gonna work on them. I just don't have a band name. Like, I just don't know what to call this shit. And he was like, well, like, what have you been doing? And I was like, well, I've been kind of getting my bag. I've been back doing stuff that I was doing in like middle school and elementary school. I'm playing mad retro Pokemon, playing mad retro Zelda, and I'm folding a lot of origami. And I've been doing like angels and stuff. And that was something I did in high school, and I never really thought about it. I used to make angels and like give them to my friends, give them to like a girl I liked or something, just to like and it was like an angel. And then I once I said it, and he was the one who's like, you should just name the band that. But he was said it as a diss. He was like, it sounds like what a shitty middle school punk band would be named. But I was like, I think it's a pretty cool name. So we both kind of laughed over it, um and then kind of realized that has to be the name of this band. Um and I look back now and I will like think of band names as jokes now. I'm just like, I can't think of a good one. I don't know what it is. And I'm just like, we just lucked out. I was so lucky that we were hanging out in that parking lot together and he mentioned what I was doing. It was like a twist of fate because everything else that I could have picked would have sucked. And it was just like the most random, like, it's like not too abrasive, but it's also not too like, I don't know. It ended up really working. And I'm stoked that that is the band name.
For sure. I really can't imagine any other name. It really does fit your guys' discography so well and just the whole vibe that you guys
I
bring,
appreciate
especially
that.
live. So that's so sick.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Before we start talking about, some of the newer stuff, I guess this is somewhere in the middle, but Somewhere City just turned 5. So congrats on that. That's
Yeah.
huge. With Somewhere City being 5 years old now, how do you feel like that holds up? I know a lot of artists, like sometimes are like, oh, that original stuff we did, we've grown from there and we still appreciate it, but maybe that's not what we're looking at anymore. I mean, how do you feel about that now that's been out for a while?
Yeah, it's hard because I feel like there's a couple ways that I look at it where I know for a fact like I'm such a not different person, it's the same person, but I'm in such a different place in my life than when we wrote that record, particularly when I was writing the songs and when we recorded it, it was just a different world, and the world was different too. Like it really feels like a distinct change. But at the same time, I feel like it does hold up in our discography a lot. Everybody's going to be most proud of the thing they just did. I've been saying this to a couple people, but like I've never ever heard an artist go into the studio and spend more money than they did on their first one and then do all this stuff and then come back and say, "Yeah, we just made this record so much worse than the last one." Nobody
Yeah.
says that.
Yeah,
It's
of
it's
course.
the truth of the matter is everybody's most stoked on the thing that they most recently did. It's human nature. It's newer and it's exciting. But I think the really awesome thing about being in a band, and particularly this band with a big discography, is like we'll get the chance to go back and find the love for those songs again when we play them live, and it's like, oh yeah, this is awesome, or like, oh, I feel this way specifically because we have so many songs. We try to shuffle around stuff live so much that like we can get to this stuff. It really feels still special, at least to me, like when I'm singing the songs again and just remember like where we were, what it did for us. And I guess that's the lens that I have to look it through.
Mhm.
It's a weird album for us, particularly because it is the record that kind of like spiked us up a lot in our trajectory. So, in my eyes, it's the first album that we had that everybody else. I'm holding a guitar pick now, just like a laser pen at a, a press conference or something. No, everybody else has been able to run with their own version of it. Like it means something different to a lot of people than it means to me. And it almost in that way, it's the first piece of our discography that has a couple different meanings, like person to person and group to group. Um, but whenever we play the song, and like particularly the last headline we did in the States was with Pink Shift and Sweet Pill, which was an awesome tour. But what we did on that tour is we opened up with Welcome to the first song, and we closed with the Air Up Here, which is the
Mhm.
last song. Every night we would play the Air Up Here to end, and I would just think like, this is amazing. Every time I felt like I was back at the release show in College Park, Maryland, the first time we ever played the songs, and everybody knew the words. It's such a humbling thing, and to be able to still feel that in the songs, to me, it still holds up. It still means exactly what it meant to me in that moment because that part of me is still alive.
Yeah, that's so sick. Which also, like, as a fan, going to, those shows and seeing how it like kind of progressed from, I guess, like late 2020 or early 2021 until even just the most recent headline tour, you could really feel the energy in the crowd. Like, people were always hype, but it was really something special. Like those last couple tours, it was absolutely insane how many people knew all the words and everything.
Yeah, those were great tours, and especially just like as an artist, it's great when you get to put together a set list that expands like a whole discography. And I think just with where we were, in our discography at that point, we were really able to get creative and pull out some stops. And I had a lot of fun. It's always fun when other people will just like, oh, someone's gonna like that deep cut, and then just those reactions and yeah, it's why you do it. You know,
Yeah.
it's a great feeling, and it keeps you motivated on the old songs too. So we always love to do that.
Sick. Which I guess, did you guys ever realize, like, was there a point when you were writing that or like in the studio maybe when you're like, oh, I think this is going to be it? Or is that something you maybe realized later on? And when did that happen?
It's hard to say because it's one of those things. I try to temper every expectation I've ever had. That's like my main thing. Um, I've been my whole thing is I'm trying to be more honest to myself and not in a way like that, but in the way that I will be upset if stuff doesn't do well. You know, I'm not going to
Hmm.
try to be like one of these cool guys who's like, oh, it doesn't matter. People don't get it. I'm not like that. I'm not that cool. I 100% like I have, and I'm trying to work on it, but it's a thing where if something doesn't do great and I put a lot of work in it, it's going to be, slightly frustrating. Like
Hmm.
it's confusing. You're confused. And I think a thing that I did a lot earlier in our career as a band, and still to this day I do to an extent, was I try to temper the expectations. Specifically, like I remember one time hanging with some homies, listening to the record and just being like, this is gonna flop so hard and like we're never gonna do anything ever again. Like because the point of where we were in our lives as two individuals is kind of like this album and whatever else is next is all question marks, just
Hmm.
because of like where we were age wise. Like it's like if this doesn't do something, like we haven't really ever toured that much, it was just a weird position. And I think as a defense mechanism, I definitely told myself, oh, it's not going to do great. It's not going to do great. But I remember one time listening through with me and my partner, and it was like, she was like, this is going to mean something to a lot of people. And I think hearing that, I showed some songs to my mom, and she was like, she's not into the emo world, but not deeply, like it's like
Hmm.
weirdly, like well, like she loves Linkin Park and Death Cab and stuff. So like,
Yeah.
but I had showed her some stuff, and she was like, no, this is gonna be a really special song. And I think when I started to hear the outside perspective of people not as involved with the band, or it felt less like people being yes men slash yes people, and it felt more like, okay, this I can tell that these people are being honest with me. Like those are two people I can consider they will always be 100% honest with me, which I love. That's like what you want in life.
Hmm.
Um, when I felt that, it was like, okay, I think this record could really be something. But she'll never get rid of the nerves. Like I had nightmares leading up to the album release where it's just like, oh, this sucks. Like, or like I had this nightmare of like we uploaded the songs wrong. So like the order was wrong and like nobody got it. And I was like, oh geez. And I it was messed up. I spent a lot of time thinking about that stuff. I still spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff with upcoming things. It just I don't know, it's a weird thing, but once we had those release shows, first one, the day the album came out, was in Philly. And the next one was the day after in DC. The next one, day after in Pittsburgh. Those three shows, I was like, all right, nothing has been like this for our band ever. I can tell that this record might mean something. It might get a life of its own. And yeah, that's kind of when I felt like it could happen, you know?
For sure. That's super sick. And then you kind of mentioned there too, with the order of the songs. Was that something that you had a lot of thought into? Because that record just flows so well. And it's obviously it's like sort of a concept album or like a concept album, right? About Somewhere
Yeah, it's
City.
like
Yeah, exactly. So was that something that like you knew writing it, or was it you wrote a couple songs and they kind of went together and you went from there?
I definitely always liked the light concept, like the destination based theme. That was always something that I was really intentional about. And then in terms of the flow of it, I appreciate you saying it flow as well. Um, it's definitely something I put a crazy amount of consideration into to every project that we've ever done, where I'm just like, this has to be the set list. Specifically with Somewhere City, it was one where it didn't exist to me until I wrote the introductory riff to Welcome To. And then I was like, that's starting the album. And I was like, and that's also ending the album. I just knew it was going to do that. I just had that vibe from the moment I picked up the guitar and played that riff the first time in 2018. I was like, that is going to be it. And then everything else I kind of filled around. And I would I commuted to work back then about an hour both ways, on the train and the bus in DC. And I would listen to like shitty demos with this. I would have like five bounces of like different track lists and different song ideas and stuff. And I would just listen to it and I'd be like, all right, well, that's not right yet. That's not right. I got to tweak this, and did that shit for like 8 months basically because I couldn't play as much. I was working like 50-hour weeks, and I couldn't play as much. I had to just think about the album. I just like think about what's coming next. Oh, if there's an unfinished demo, I'm like thinking about a bridge. Which is like a really interesting kind of thought problem for that record where when I got to the guitar, it's like I'd already been thinking about this song for 6 hours. So sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad, and there was holes in there. But most of the track list was kind of written, yeah, sequentially. So it was like Escape Rope and title track was always supposed to be those two back to back. It's just how it was gonna go. Find Your Throne, as soon as I had the song as a demo, it's like, well, that's obviously right before the end. That just has to be right before the end. There were certain tracks. It was like, okay, well, we worked on Skeleton Key together, and we're like, okay, well, that fits in there. And Say Less, we know we want that before Escape Rope. Okay, works after Doctor Whom's too. All of that was good, and we just didn't have a track two. Like that was my whole thing. And then so one day I was like, I have to write a track two, maybe like a week or two before we left for our first full US tour ever with Stars Hollow. I wrote a demo for 24-hour drive through. Me and Pat were like, okay, we have to like work on this, but we can't really because we're gonna go to the studio right after that tour. So we just played it on that tour for the first time and workshopped it. Like we changed things from show to show. We're like, okay, this time it's gonna be like this. And it was the first time I realized that like I loved hearing bands play new songs like live and shit. I don't think everybody else does.
Oh,
Like I don't know if everybody because they don't know.
yeah,
They don't know what
exactly.
part to get excited for. And then I was like, damn, does this song suck? Like like this entire time I was like, maybe we're fucked because this is our track too. We might as well do it, but we ended up tracking it, and once we tracked it, it was like, okay, this is the single, and like I think the whole record's complete now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really does fit so well there off of like it kind of sets the tone for the energy of the rest of the album, I think. And then,
Sure.
the
Damn, I
transitions
appreciate
like you
that.
mentioned, Escape Rope into the title track is like one of the best transitions probably in emo music, modern.
Damn, thank you, dog.
Which is yeah. And then so I guess one of the things too with that is like kind of going back to what you're saying about playing that live. I do think that's kind of a funny thing about playing like new songs live because you're trying to gauge a reaction, but at the same time like it is kind of impossible to get a reaction other than like people might vibe with it, but they can't sing along, they can't really go hard because they don't know what's coming up, which is like always
Exactly.
something like
Yeah, at least in our world, and especially I think at that time, because it was like a tweener time for us, where it's like, oh, people do know songs by us. So I think if it was a thing where we were just playing like a local show and we only had three songs out, and we're like, this is a new one, and it was that, people would be like, oh, the same reaction as everything else, because nobody knows us. But it
yeah.
was like that weird in between thing of like slightly being known, but not enough that people are going to be ridiculously stoked on something new, or on the flip side, they want to hear something else that's already in your discography and not, unreleased. So it's a weird thing because when I would go to shows and a band would play a new song, I'd be locked in. I'd be like, oh, I gotta remember this for like when the album's coming. I try to like implement it into my musical memory. So that was just the relationship I had with it. But I think that is a pretty small minority of people. I still love it though.
Yeah. Which kind of talking about your discography now, I mean, I'm sure anyone that listens to you knows you have a plethora of music. There's just so much depth there. And with
There's a
that,
bit.
I guess, um, so with like Gami Gang, for example, I know you kind of mentioned in the past that there's some songs that you like haven't played since that released.
Mhm.
And so with something like that, are there songs that you write specifically for the album that you're not going to play live, or does it kind of just happen that like some are more popular?
At this point, I would not say still specifically, but there's always that thought in your head, like with like a Gami Gang, right? It's 20 songs long. We at the time that album came out, we weren't touring, it was COVID vibes, but tours before that, the most songs that we'd ever played during a live set was like 11. So it was always a understanding that some of them were going to get maybe the short end of the stick. And it also was complicated by the fact that like we never really got to properly tour off Summer City. We did like one full US super DIY style in December, and then COVID shut everything down. We never really got to play every song to the fullest extent. So now we have 30 songs of music that we're like, we got to fit in everything. But also now there's been like months and months of people listening to ones, and now we got to play ones that people want to hear. So like that was like the first era of it ever becoming kind of complicated. Um, and the last 3 or 4 years of living in that kind of world, it's been an understanding where it's like we have a pretty good idea. It's like if we did Dirty Mirror Selfie on Feeling I Found, it's like we're this is probably gonna be played live. Like we
Mhm.
kind of gotta play this live. But there's definitely tracks on records where you're like, will we get the chance to do this? Like
Yeah.
is there gonna be a time? Um, and you never really know. That's the other thing. It's kind of weird. It's not like um the worst thing in the world, but you might be thinking at some point, like, is this the last time we ever play this song live? And you just don't know it. That's kind of sad.
Yeah, for sure. Which you guys, when you play live, a lot of bands have paper set lists or like they have that all figured out. Do you guys use set list or do you call everything as an audible?
No, we have a set list that we like to stick to for an entire tour, but we just because I feel like preparation wise, for me and Pat, it allows us to get um even though it is like the same thing every night, I think it allows us to be more creative of it as a project. So
Mm,
for example, like we'll think of, oh, let's like how are we gonna do like an interlude between this song and that song, or like certain songs that aren't together on records that we do back to back, and like how do they flow out of each other? And I think that's such a like production wise, like show production wise, it's such a fun thing to think about for the experience of pretty much everybody that gets to see this show throughout the entire like span of a tour. Where if there's something that one night it's like, damn, this was cool as shit. And then some other night it's like, oh well, we just did something kind of standard. I wouldn't want to cheat certain people out of that experience.
mm,
So I think it allows us to try harder at certain things that bring the whole thing together. And then on top of that, I think it allows us to really like lock in an order. Like once Pat gets us a groove on the drumming, you stop thinking about what's coming next and you actually kind of get to perform the songs
mhm,
instead of a like, hope I don't fuck this up. Now it's like oh, I'm gonna like add some shit or like play this with different flavors, different voicings. Same thing vocally and for guitar stuff. A fun thing that we've like realized recently is like since it's just me and Pat, rhythmically we'll always be together, or if I fuck up, the whole thing will be fucked up. But like we can do shit like, oh, let's like switch up a chord here, or like
mhm,
switch up a little lead, do some different kind of things. That's like a thing that we'll spice up from show to shows. We'll have like little spots. It's like, oh, that's gonna be like improvised. Like in Bossa Nova Core, we do some improvisation, um, um, in between these little breaks and just stuff like that. But yeah, we don't have a paper set list though. Like we've never really been one to do that. We've only done it a few times where it's like, oh, we're not as familiar with the set yet. But as a tour goes on, I forget about writing the set. I don't do anything. We don't print it. We don't got a printer. Like, we are just like, oh, this song's next. We got it. And people always ask for it. And I feel so bad because I'm like, I don't know, dude, it's right in here. Like, but maybe we will. There's a couple times we've written it down. Like when we toured in Japan, that was
mm.
one of the coolest things. But we would write them down because the dude who was like the tour manager and he put the whole thing together over there, he would like do the set list and also write it out in Japanese, and that was really sick.
That's sick. Which I guess if you want to talk more about that, how was Japan? I guess that was your first time
Sure.
overseas as a band, right?
Well, we'd done England before,
Okay.
but yeah, but it was all in the same year. So it was like we went to England in July, had a couple like a 2 week thing in the US with this artist Glaive. That was pretty cool. And then we did a um like I think we did like a festival. Yeah, we did Wonder Years Festival, Loneliest Place on Earth, and then the Riot Festival, and immediately shot off to Japan. And we were there for like 2 weeks. And we came back and then we did England again. But with Japan, it was so crazy because like when we first got there, so it was like a 12 and a half hour flight from Toronto to Japan. The day before we played Riot Fest, like I said, and we flew out at 5 o'clock in the morning to get to Toronto, then go Toronto to Japan. That was crazy because we were originally supposed to go to Osaka and meet the tour there because we were like, we can't do it. We're gonna land like 2 hours before this first show in Tokyo. There's like a DIY skate park show,
Mm.
but our we missed our connecting flight because we had to change over all our luggage and stuff, like all the
Yeah.
gear and shit. Couldn't do it in time. And it was like we're stranded in Tokyo, like everything's messed up. So what ended up happening is the people who are coming or who are like running with the vans for the gear for that first Tokyo show. They came and picked us up from the airport and brought us to that first show. And everyone was like, "Oh, are you gonna play? Are you gonna play?" We're like, "Nah, no, no, no," because like at this point, like I think Pat and Drew, our front of house engineer, they managed to get some sleep on the tour, or on the flight. I think I can't do it, or at the time couldn't do it. Uh, I was like up for 30 straight hours because like I didn't really sleep the night before after Riot Fest. I was wired, so I was just like, I was pretty sure we were crashing to Osaka. It would be totally chill. None of this bad stuff would happen. But everyone kind of pressured us into doing it, and it was the most fever dream experience I've ever had in my entire life, just playing in this skate park that's like 100 degrees in the middle of like one of the most humid countries, and like it's so hot and warm, and like I'm like, starting to like not visually hallucinate, but like see things a little differently, when
Yeah.
you like are super tired, you get like the lines and you're like,
Yeah, for
is
sure.
this a migraine or am I dreaming? So like that was my first thing that I ever experienced in Japan. It was crazy because right after that, we drove overnight to Osaka, which is like 8 hours to get to the Airbnb for the show that we're staying at. We are playing the show in Osaka that day. And it was so crazy. It was us and Prince Daddy in this van with all the gear. And we were all like laying on top of it, trying to sleep. Everybody was joking. I'm at this point like mentally just gone because another thing is I can't sleep in a van. I will fall asleep and my legs will be asleep. I'll wake up, it's pins and needles. It's awful. So I'm just up here listening to our two tour manager guys, just like really they're wired off. They got like a bunch of caffeine. And I was just listening to these guys speak Japanese, and I was just like, I am having the craziest moment of my entire life right now. We get up, we get to Osaka, everything is crazy, so hungry that it's just like, what are we gonna do? Like, it's breakfast time. We just walked, like, because there was point 0.5 miles away. There was like the only McDonald's in, or sorry, we got to Kyoto. It was Kyoto before Osaka, so we stayed in Kyoto. The only McDonald's in Kyoto, like, or at least in the area we were at. We just walked there for McDonald's breakfast, and I was just walking through the streets and just being like, it might be because I've been up for 40 straight hours, but this is the most beautiful place I've ever been to in my entire life. Just like hearing like birds in the background, but like just the a silent city. It was just really amazing. But beyond that, beyond getting there and all the shenanigans, the shows were fucking awesome. Like it was one straight up the coolest experience I've ever had as a musician. Strictly off the fact that like, we've done stuff in the United States all the time, and that's amazing. And we're so lucky, and a lot of people will come and it's beautiful. But when you're literally halfway around the world, different hemisphere slash whatever that is different. I not whatever. When you're on the other side of the earth and you're straight up just like, okay, almost nobody speaks the language that I speak right now. Effectively, this is a part of the world that I have almost no interaction with other than the niche pieces of media that get passed between our two countries, which is not too niche. It's pretty big, but that is the only lens that I am able to see it through. But I'm here and there are 100, 150 people, some the Tokyo shows, 200 people, 250 people coming to a show and are so excited about the music that's happening that like it's a feeling that I can't really still comprehend or explain very well, but it's like the most humbling shit where you're just like, I'm in Japan off of music, For like most of my life, I never thought I'd leave the East Coast.
Hmm.
But it's like I'm in not Canada, not England. I'm in Japan off of music. Like it's the craziest feeling. And every day you wake up, you're just like, this is insane and it's amazing and it's a beautiful place. And we're trying to get back there as soon as we can. It was really awesome and just yeah, it was great. And I mentioned like I mentioned Prince Daddy, but we're there with Prince Daddy, Oso Oso, and the Hotelier, which are like three bands that in different points of my life have all been my favorite band ever.
Yeah.
And so on top of that, it's like just I'm in Japan hanging out with Oso and the Hotelier and Prince Daddy, dude.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
insane.
if I could go back to myself in 2017, 2018 and tell myself that, I would just be like, you're lying. Like that's crazy. But instead, it's one of my, if not the, best experiences I've ever had with music.
And that's got to be crazy too. Like, especially you're saying the language barrier. I know a lot of artists, they're like, the moment I felt like I had made it was when people were singing my song back at me, right? Like that. in a country where they don't even, necessarily speak the language. That's got to be insane. Did you guys have
Yeah.
any of that?
Definitely, yeah, that was the thing too. Or certain things where, like it's happening in like England too, where there's different cultural interactions with music, I guess,
Mm.
where like it's Scotland, for example, they'll do this like here we fucking go thing, like this chant. It's a soccer thing, I think,
Yeah.
or just maybe something that to get hype. But it's like when they do that before your song drops, it means like it means you're doing something sick. And in Japan, it was like they were like singing riffs, like not just songs, but like they'll be like na 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 and like dance inside time. Just like we don't get this that much in the United States, but like having a riff sung back to you, especially as a guitarist, I'm just like, okay,
Yeah.
this place is awesome. Like that's a thing where um it just feels so amazing. And then yeah, hearing people sing back the lyrics to your song in a language that's not primary.
Mhm.
Or something that was even cooler is there's this band out there, Seventh Jet Balloon, that's like a two piece, and they've on YouTube and Twitter and stuff, they've like covered our songs before. But luckily enough, they played a show, our last show in Tokyo. They played a daytime show at like it started at 9 a.m. and went to like 1 p.m. And our show started at like 3 and went to 9 p.m. Um, so they were like, just come through. We play at 12. I was in town and I was like, all right, I'm gonna just walk over to the show, see it. And they were like, hey, what's up? Like, first of all, just being in a DIY show in Japan is just so cool. Um, Meeting hella people, some people who were coming to the show later, some people were just there and seeing these awesome bands. Saw this band Chemtrail, which is really cool. Um, and then Seventh Jet played, and then they played a cover of 24-hour Drive Through. And I was just like, that in itself is crazy. Where I'm just like, I'm here for our shit and I'm watching a band cover our song, different country, like
Mhm.
it's straight up something that, like I said, like if you told me that 5, 6 years ago, I would not have believed you, but it's a really beautiful and humbling thing. It reminds you why you do it.
Yeah, for sure. With flying to a country like Japan, I remember your old rig used to be like massive full analog pedal board. You recently switched to the modeler. How has that, just as an artist, I guess, kind of influenced your music at all, switching over to the modeling?
Yeah, I mean, so it's made things easier, right? End of the day, everybody wants to be playing through like nine Marshall stacks and like that's fun, but you can't always do that. Especially when you're talking about, like we're like going to England, going to Japan, going to Europe, going to Southeast Asia. You want to be able to have the same consistency. I use the Neural DSP Quad Cortex.
Mm.
The home rig right now is kind of crazy. It it's almost like a combination and using modelers more like how I previously used amps. For a minute, it was using one modeler, how I used to use four amps together,
Hmm.
because I used to use a left and right guitar signal that had automatic double tracking type of vibes going to it, like delays and
Hmm.
shit. One in the center that was completely dry, just gain, no like reverb, no nothing, and then a bass amp for my low end signal, which is like split from my guitar. And all that was being processed on this huge analog pedal board that you're referencing, a 32-inch, genuinely like 80-pound pedal board, with a RJM Mastermind. We'll get really techie with the gear. We can get very techie with it, which is a MIDI controller looper for all your pedals. Basically, what that allowed me to do at the time was to switch between multiple pedal presets for multiple different signals at one time and control my four outputs. Then for a extended period of time, I started using the quad cortex as a replacement for all of that or most of it.
Hmm.
Not the automatic double tracking. So the idea there was it was direct in, it still split my guitar signal, and it gave me not just access to four amps, but to six with the outputs, which just it helped fill out the sound. Obviously, that's pretty much the ethos of how this band started was like, how are we going to do that with two people? Like you can do it with four, it sounds great, but how can we do it as two? And as someone with a music engineering and production background, it's always been a really really fun challenge, and it's something I'm thinking about all the time. So the quad cortex was a big evolution, but what ended up happening between the last of our tours from 2024 or 2023 and the beginning of our tours from 2024, I was like, I got to step it up because what I really realized was the quad cortex allows you to do so much more than what I was just doing with it. It is a tool of untapped and unparalleled ability. I basically was like, instead of thinking this is all of my guitar amps and my bass amp in it, I was like, I can do so much more if I say I have one for my guitar, but that does my direct in sound, but it also now goes to amps on stage or cabinets on stage. So I get the same sound behind me as is in front of me. That just feels better. It sounds better for everybody. It
Mhm.
sounds better for people in the front. The same thing is going to be true for bass, and I can do more processing. I can do crazy effects for different songs, and I'm not jamming the CPU with too much information. I'm doing the same thing with layers, acoustic blend, a clean blend, a fuzz layer. That's to be able to give our front of house engineer Drew as much potential as he can to make this instead of like a means to an ends mix as live mixes tend to be. Now it is a this is as close to mixing in fucking Pro Tools as you could possibly be. I got guitar layers, I got bass, I got other stuff, I got DIs, I got vocals, I all this idea. So now it's like all like same vibe, MIDI controller. It's a combination of both.
Mhm.
MIDI controller on the pedal board, and it's got um all of that stuff is racked up now. Different quads to be able to do all that stuff together and switch between the patches between multiple of them. It's a crazy extravagant rig, but it is what keeps me wanting to do music is to be like, okay, we could call it in. We could say this is as good as it gets, right? But that's not fun for me. What's fun for me is figuring out how can I make this even better as we grow as a band. There might be a day someday where it ends up, you know, being too much or being at the peak of its powers. But I don't see that as like a reason to stop trying, you know?
For sure.
Like I, we have been lucky enough to like for example, like I'm lucky enough that Neural DSP thought we were cool enough to give us artist pricing on Quad Cortex and and help us with stuff, like broadcast our shit. So I'm like, what I'm what am I gonna do? Not like try to maximize this,
Yeah, for
like
sure.
same thing, just certain things like that is you, I view it as an artist responsibility. And I don't shame anybody who doesn't do this, but I view it as something that we owe to the people who helped us get here.
Mhm.
The people who listen, the people who come to these shows. I want to give you the greatest experience that you possibly can from these two people while still being, what Origami Angel is, the
Yeah.
ethos of this band. And this is the particular topic I could probably talk about for 9 hours if we wanted to, but yeah, it's right now that's kind of the laydown of it. A bunch of quads, got cabs on stage again, rock shit, but also fake rock shit.
For sure. Which did you start as a two piece and decide like this is enough and wanted to build your sound from there, or was it kind of the other way around where being a two piece necessitated finding that sound?
I was obsessed with the idea of being in a two piece. That was like when I saw two piece band, some of my favorites that I'd ever seen, like the Obsessives originally in the DC area. They were the OG emo two piece that I saw. Two nights out of Denton, Texas. Let's see them and just be like, that was a huge inspiration to me. And there's other two pieces I'm gonna miss right now. Just off the top, Japan Droids, right?
Mm.
Like that was a band that like my cousin put me onto, and I was just like, how are they doing this? How are they doing this to two people? And the um ingenuity that all three of those different bands and many other two pieces that I've seen, they all go about it a different way. They would all figure out how they do this two-piece thing a different way. Some of it's different amps, some of it's different splits, doing things on pickups. I've seen people do some crazy shit where they intentionally grounded like the coils of their high strings together so that only the low one would come through with little screws over the
Mhm.
magnets so that they would have like a low thing and they go send it to like a polyoctave or something. I just saw all this crazy stuff, and that's not something you see when you see five-piece indie rock band. And that has its own place. That is beautiful in its own right. It's so cool too. But the gearhead and the freaking weirdo in me was like, that is something I need to be a part of. I need to figure that out. It was always about the challenge and this. I feel like it's the underdog story, right? It's like,
Mhm.
oh, this isn't gonna work, or someone's like, maybe if they don't know, it's like, oh, we'll see you live. It might not be the same, but my goal is it's not like we're gonna sound like a full two piece. It's like I want us to sound like the fullest band. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like I want to come up and just be like, if you're in this room and you close your eyes, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know how many people. And the greatest compliment back in the day is people would come to house shows and be upstairs and they come in the basement and hear us and they say after the show, oh, I was looking around for your bassist. I was trying to figure out where that low end sound was coming from. And I would just be like, let's go. Like that's what I do this shit for, you know?
Hmm.
It's for the songs too and like for the community, but like why Origami Angel started that way is I really 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 wanted that. And it's been like a you know, almost at this point like a lifelong goal of mine to be in this two piece that has such a massive sound, you know? And then
Yeah.
obviously there's other examples in it in a big way like White Stripes and stuff like that. You see these iconic bands, is it Royal Blood with the bass and stuff like that. Um people are drawn to that type of thing. I'm one of the people who's drawn to it, and I wanted to do it. So it was both necessity, I guess, because like because of choosing to be in a two piece, though. You
Hmm.
know, it wasn't like we are in a two piece because we couldn't find anybody else. We probably could have, but to me, it was necessity because that's what I wanted it to be. That's what me and Pat wanted it to be was a two piece band,
Hmm.
and let's figure this out and like let's do the math and the engineering and see how far we can push this thing.
Yeah. And with that too, like you're the only pitched instrument in the band, and like with just being two people, do you feel like that allows you to do more stuff musically with like it's two people, you can just lock in.
Yeah, I think a thing that you know I'd never really thought about until like the last couple of years was I had friends who came out to me and was like, "Oh, was it a good set?" And I'm like, "I thought we played pretty good, you know." And they're like, "No, you guys were tight." And I was like, "I didn't feel like I was as tight as I should have been." You know, I felt like rhythmically I was a little off. But people would be like, my friend Kyle told me this sometime. He's like, "You don't understand. Like, for you and your situation, your version of tight is, oh, I was a 64th note off from what Pat was playing." For a lot of other bands, it's about a lot more moving pieces than that. It's about right notes and, you know, tuning and shit like that. And I was just like, damn, I never realized that that's one of these advantages where, like you said, we can just choose to lock to each other. And it basically means our band's in rhythm, you know, like we are like that backbeat. And I think it's an extra advantage that I'm playing rhythmy, leady guitar at the same time as singing because all of my shit is going to be together,
Hmm.
right? It's not this like disconnect. And I think about it a lot where monitoring in general, whether it's on the floor or in ear monitors, like people have to hear an interpretation of what someone else is playing. And sometimes it can be five different people, right? And that's what's so amazing about these live bands that are great that have four or five people in them. It's like, well, you're going off of your interpretation of what this guitarist is going off, which is off of their interpretation of either a drummer or a click track or both, and there's all this mental math that goes into it and it still sounds great, but it's something that for us it's like I'm in rhythm with Pat and my vocals are in rhythm with I'm still perceiving the same rhythm, like it's not the
Hmm.
guitar and the vocal are perceiving two different versions of it. So I think that there's a lot more of like um the exact personality that we choose to push forward in a live setting, right? It's like we don't
Yeah.
have to try as hard for that. We have to try as hard as setting up, way harder than everybody else. Like
Yeah.
that's like the thing that the drawback. But yeah, it's something that I guess like I kind of took for granted a little bit. And like when I really started thinking about it, it's like, yeah, like we can do stuff like I can like do a little extra like instead of a dun 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 dun, I can be like dun 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 dun, dun. And it's not like I'm gonna be out of time with the other guitarist, you
Hmm.
know, like it's not like I'm gonna be out of time with the bassist because it's all coming from that one instrument. I think that gives it a lot of power for my position. And same thing for Pat is if he chooses to do some shit, it's only one person he has to worry about catching it. And I say, okay, you're doing that thing. I'm a, you know, just be more of a support role right here while you're doing this fill. And it's yeah to you know make a long story short, yes, it definitely pushes a lot of things that we can do creatively and it's fun.
Yeah, that's really cool. Which kind of going off of that, do you guys ever kind of like improvise on your songs when you're playing them live, or do you usually like to a track?
It's a it takes a life of its own. I feel like during a tour I feel like the first couple shows were usually like okay sure, but then there's other things where we've been playing them for so long, like certain songs where I'll listen back and be like we're doing something so different from the album, like we're doing something like I'm palm muting differently or like I'm singing a slightly different melody or like Pat's very like maybe on the record he was more energetic and like he's taking for a softer part on the song, like he's like bringing it down more than we usually do, and I'll hear that and be like damn, like I you know I don't listen to our records too much.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's points of reference, but I'll just be like damn, this is like we do some certain things like way different than it's just like a thing that we ran with and never really thought about it. But yeah, there's definitely like a lot of improvisation. Like I'll do like certain vocal things differently every night. I know Pat will like do different like cymbal combinations for certain stuff. Like he fucks around with some stuff. I'll definitely like play different inversions of chords for fun. Just it keeps it fun, over the
Yeah.
whole set. And it's like when you get like yourself a guideline, like we were talking about earlier, it's like, okay, well, it's gonna be this set and we're gonna do this shit in between, and it'll be like this. When you have a guideline like that, it's almost easier to kind of twist certain things and be like, all right, well, tonight I'm gonna tap into this sweepy part in bossa nova core, or like tonight I'm gonna do this crazy like pick slide thing and no offense or something like that. And I think as for songs that we've played live longer, we definitely tend to do that more with like 24-hour drive through type stuff, um title track things. Like I'll do a little like improvisation leads and just certain things like that over the course of the many years that we've been playing those songs.
And then in the studio, to, I guess kind of along the same vein, are you a band where you're like, we've rehearsed this, like we know exactly how it's going to be when we're throwing down the tracks, or do you guys experiment a little bit in the studio? Because when you hear it, sometimes it's kind of different once you get that full mix going.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I would say that in the past, we've been a band that tried to know exactly what we were doing and then hitting the studio and then do it. Like that was definitely the way that we went about Summer City. Um, but when we've come to certain records, specifically Brightest Days and Feeling Not Found, Brightest Days, there was a lot more experimentation. I feel like more with like guitar tone and guitar performance. But then Feeling Not Found, it was like very much more experimental towards the structures of the songs,
Mhm.
where the demos of what came in was like kind of like very crazily written, because I wrote it all during like the first couple months of COVID. Like you can tell that whoever wrote it did not see live music for like a couple months and had not played with another person. It just sounded very um like I'm trying to find the right word for it, disjointed. And I think it was a song thing. Like they just weren't there. But we had the wonderful opportunity to do Feeling I Found with Will Yip. He
Mhm.
was, one of the greatest, I think the best producer in rock music.
Yeah.
Um, and that was a dream come true. And just being with him gave us a lot more confidence to like it would be like, oh, what if we tried a second verse there? And like, oh, like if it's a fruit wine that didn't have a second verse originally, he was like, oh, we go into that. I was like, oh, we do it halftime, and then we'll start playing that in the live room while he's in there. And he's like, no, that's fucking it. Like that's what we have to do. Just having the confidence to do that with somebody who has been a part of so many iconic records. It's like he knows, he's not gonna bullshit you,
Yeah.
or else those records wouldn't have been iconic. Like he doesn't bullshit people. He does his job so well. And that's another thing I could go on forever about, but just having that voice in the room and being able to work with him and collaborate as more than just me and Pat and my stubborn self most of the time was is how it was before. I was like, this is how it has to be. But with age, breaking out of that habit, and kind of being willing to accept that, it's definitely a lot easier when like the person who is the third voice is like a Grammy nominated producer.
Yeah, for sure.
So working with Will is so cool, just because like there's that side of it. It's like he's obviously like such an esteemed name in the rock world, but at the same time, it's like he's the most down to earth person. He's so friendly. You meet him and it's like, oh, I've known this guy for 15 years. He's
Mhm.
just makes you excited about stuff like that. So yeah, I guess to answer your question in a really roundabout way, now we tend to experiment a little bit more.
Nice. Which I guess you kind of mentioned like your previous records too. So the last time you were in for a full length would have been Gami Gang, right? And then that was you guys pretty much did that yourself, right?
Yeah, I produced that record myself in the bedroom that I had at my parents' house.
Which that's insane because the production value on that, like I remember when that came out, it was just like this is everything that was good about Somewhere City, but like taken up a level. So I mean,
Man, that's just
how did that like how did you make that decision, I guess, to just say like we're gonna do it ourselves?
Dude, it was hard, and I appreciate the kind words on the production. That's one I'm like proud of, but also at the same time, it's one of those things you think about. I was like, well, what if we could have got to the studio? The thing about it was we had all these songs, and they lived in this purgatory of of COVID. Like, it's like, what were we gonna fucking do? We just got off Summer City and we had all these plans. It's like, oh, when we record the record, we're gonna do it like at this studio and in blah blah blah, and it's gonna be awesome. But then every week that was passing, it became more clear that that was like not an option for us. And I had this conversation with Jake Salzer, who runs Counterintuitive, and I was like, dude, like first is the first record we ever got an advance for. Like we ever got some money up front
Yeah.
to record with. And I was like, dude, I'm just gonna be honest with you. Like, I don't think we can sit on these songs for like another year. Because at this
Mhm.
time, I'm actually starting to write the feeling I found material, like this, like the first seeds of it.
Yeah.
So like 3 years ago, but I'm feeling new music coming.
Mhm.
I'm like, we can't just sit on Gami Gang forever. It's just like a thing. And I was like, dude, like I think what we have to do, I think we just have to track it in my bedroom. Like I think that's the only way we do it. I like so it was crazy because at the time, I was living with my rents and my little brother lives there and he was like, I want to say like 10, maybe 11. Now he is it 2020 is when it was recorded. Yeah, he was 10. And he's in like fourth grade digital school. So and just obviously it's like a whole thing. And like I was, working with him in school and shit. But I basically like came to my parents and was like, listen, like I was also supposed to be like moving out right when COVID started. So everything just like, got wrapped on. They're like, "Oh, you're still here? That kind of sucks." But it eventually turned into a thing where I went to them. I was like, "Listen, like I got this record. This band's starting to pop. I feel like we can't just do nothing. Can I just have Pat come in here, right into my room, mask on, whatever. I'm a flip the bed up, just get these drums in here. And for 3 weekends, so for 3 weeks, I kept the drums in there so I could like tweak stuff. But I
Mhm.
would have him come on the weekends, and he brought his drum kit, and I would rent these mics on the weekend from a website called mikrentals.com, which sounds sketchy, but it's real. And so with some help from Jake Checkaway, who did Somewhere City, he like helped me with some mic like recommendations and placements, and I would FaceTime him and be like, how I set this whole thing up. And then we did that kind of together. So with his guidance there, um, and then we kind of just chopped away on the record bit by bit. And it was just like, I guess this is how it's gonna sound, like bedroom
Yeah.
drums. When I listen now, I'm like, it's has this very claustrophobic sound of the drums, but I think it really fits what that album was going for.
Mhm.
Where I think Summer City is more roomy, it has all this space and it feels very atmospheric, it feels very airy, no pun intended.
Mhm.
But when we did Gami, I knew it was like a very like isolating record and a very self-contained lyrically, not as like broad as Summer City was. So I think when I listen back, it ended up working for what it was. But we technically recorded with nicer mics than we did for Summer City. And then Jake was just able to crush it on the mix. Like luckily there
Mhm.
was like enough there that he's able to just crush it. And I think Pat gave great performances on the album. It was crazy to record at home because at first, some people who won't be named were like, I don't know if it's a great idea. I think it might sound like shit. It might not. I was like, to be honest, you might be right. It might sound like shit, but let's try it though.
Mhm.
And then once certain things were, heard, everyone was like, okay, this is probably going to be good. Let's, approve the rest of our budget can be spent on these mics and the mixing and that shit. So it ended up working out. Crazy experience, crazy thing. I would not try to do it ever again for 20 songs in my bedroom, maybe two, but
Yeah.
not 20.
Which I mean, you guys release so frequently too. And you were mentioning earlier that you were already starting to write the Feeling Not Bound stuff back when I guess Gami was being worked on. How far in advance do you guys, how deep is is the queue?
I've like slowed down a little bit because I feel like it was really easy for me to get into the bag in those
Yeah.
first couple months of the pandemic. Um but then once we got back in the touring world, it was like the stuff comes more in bursts, it'll be like, oh,
Mhm.
3 or 4 songs here, 3 or 4 like, oh, these are cool. And I just put them, I have a folder back catalog. Let's see if like, we need anything, we can pull some stuff from there. Um but really like I think so, like Brightest Days was written right around that same time, like a couple months after that, like in the
Mhm.
Gami Gang era, like when we were recording it. So there's all that stuff that kind of just piled up, and like the last 3 years has been like, well, let's find a home for all this, like sonically, let's figure out how we're gonna do all of them, serve all these songs with the same level of care that we've done in the past, as we also adjust back into touring. So I think the writing ethos has kind of been taken up by those two regards of the band, like those two worlds are kind of what we've lived in. But
Mhm.
then I think the approach we took with somewhere, or sorry, with Feeling I Found has really like um kind of paved the way of like I think what we'll do going forward, where it's like we took a lot of time with those songs, and it was more of a thing where we're gonna do everything that we can to like service every single song on that record in the studio, using the studio as a tool,
Mhm.
not as a means to an end.
That makes sense. Which do you write like a whole bunch of songs and then group them into projects after the fact, or are you like writing songs for projects as they happen?
In the past and most of the time, it's always for a project.
Okay,
It's
that makes
always like
sense.
this has got to be like this,
Yeah,
folders on the desktop type vibe.
for
Brightest
sure.
days, feeling I found, like this is gonna fit there. Um, but I think it tends to kind of be both, where it's like I write a bunch of songs and that ends up being the project because like all the feeling I found stuff, it's like that was all from the specific time and the
Mhm.
specific era, the specific sound of what I was, going through and just like musically what I was rocking with at that moment. Same thing, brightest days, even though they're like several months apart, like only three or four, it's like
Mhm.
um you can tell the sonic difference. And then, whatever comes next is probably going to be the same vibe where it's like, okay, it these songs existed at this time in my life or this span, they work together. That'll be the record,
Yeah, for
or
sure.
EP, whatever it is.
Which I guess kind of like to that end, what like how long does it take you to get a song together and like you to know that like this is the song? Like about how long I guess usually does it take you to write that stuff?
It's so different for every single song because I think every song comes together differently. Like there's certain tracks where like I can think of where it just came at once. Like I'm trying to think of an example. Like recently, like a Thank You New Jersey, like
Mhm.
that comes in like 15, 20 minutes, and then it's like, all right, time to demo this because like this is the song. It just comes together. But then there's certain songs like Bossa Nova Core where I have the intro riff and the little jazzy part, the bossa
Mhm.
part, and the verse, and then going back in the riff for a year and a half, maybe 2 years before I even add a bridge to it. The
Mhm.
whole time I'm just thinking, what is the right thing to come to here? And it didn't happen for almost 2 years. Like that was one where touching up that song was one of the
Mhm.
last things that we did for Gami Gang.
Damn.
Figuring out everything for that song. So it's just weird shit like that where sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 5 years. There's a track on Feeling Not Found where the intro riff was like I wrote in high school and could never ever write a song around it until this record. Um, there's songs on Gami Gang that are like that. Like Mock Bike is like that. That's a riff from 2016, and it just never worked until I wrote a song about it. So sometimes it takes 5 years. There's probably riffs that I have right now that I haven't finished from when I was 19 that I'll finish now. But there's also songs that I've would complete yesterday.
Yeah.
And um that's kind of like the beauty of all of it. Sometimes it comes quick, sometimes it takes years. I know it's like a cop out answer, but
No, for
it sucks.
sure.
But it's all
Yeah, I think that's something that like anyone that's written music before I can totally understand. Because yeah, sometimes it's just like I can hear it in my head, this is the song, and other times it's just like I've got a bunch of riffs, but they don't really go together. How do I piece them together? Which ones do I pick? Um, to that end, do you have any like advice, I guess, for anyone that's writing music or maybe just starting to, and is looking for somewhere to start?
yeah. I guess real talk, it's super easy to like get in your head about all the music stuff. And I do it all the time to this day, every single day of my life. Get super in my head and anxious and shit. But if you just remember at the end of the day, like this has always been about fun, and it's always been about expression and what you're trying to express. As long as you're being authentically yourself, there's all this shit that people say, oh, good chorus, good hook, whatever genres of music. It really does not matter as long as you're getting something out of it,
Mhm.
the way that you interact with music. Um, it's hard to see that sometimes, especially in a music industry that's so commercialized. But at the end of the day, this has always been about fun. The first
Mhm.
time you picked up an instrument, whatever instrument it was, or listened to your favorite song, you were not thinking about anything except for how much you enjoyed it,
Mhm.
And I think as long as you go around with that ethos, that same feeling that music has made you feel since you fell in love with it, whenever it was, that will really be a guiding light. It's been a guiding light for me whenever anything was fucked up, is
Mhm.
just to think about that.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, makes a lot of sense. So I guess
Yeah, it's just
yeah,
help you free yourself.
how long have you been writing music?
Like technically, I feel like I've been writing music since I was like 8 or 9 years old. Good music, definitely not. But like it came in waves, right? Like, but
Mhm.
I knew like I saw the Jonas Brothers when I was like 8 years old on fucking Disney Channel or whatever, and I was like, Man, I could do that. I want to be in a band. I want to play guitar and whatever. And I would like write in my notebooks in class, like when we were supposed to be doing independent reading, just like write lyrics and stuff and
Mhm.
like try to write songs and shit. And I started playing guitar and I was like 8 or 9. My mom, she was like really taught me some stuff when I was younger because she like would always sing and play songs and stuff. And she actually wrote songs too. Not in any sort of career way, but just songs that I think
Mhm.
still to this day are like really good. So I would see her, and I'm just like really lucky to have a person like that in my life who could pass on to something very early to me and pass on a love. And my dad also has a similar love of music and like he played drums and stuff. And it was always cool. Like they always did stuff on the side. And but as the more I get older, I'm just feel so lucky to have really, really musical parents.
Mhm.
Or people who were down with it. Were they always down with me being a punk rock band? That's a different story. But people who could at least appreciate music. But so once my mom kind of showed me some stuff, I was like, okay, well, I see this. And like I wanted to do it. You want to
Mhm.
do the things that you see from the people that you trust
Yeah,
and respect.
absolutely.
And so I think that was something that I thought that I could do. And then I feel like everybody always like makes like fake bands when they're like, "Oh, we're gonna be in band and you're gonna be on like bass and
Mhm.
keys and shit." And I always think stuff like that with like people and like obviously nobody wanted to do it. But then I found Garage Band
Oh.
and then everything changed. Probably when I was 12 or 13 years old, maybe 11 even. I found GarageBand and I would record with the speaker in the MacBook and make some crazy, deranged, fucked up sounding shit. Like with homies, like my friends would come over and I'd just like make a beat and I didn't know how to quantize yet. So I would like play the whole song on the MIDI keyboard and it would sound awful. And I'd be like, nah, let's do guitar and now you sing over it. And we do that and like these crazy, like unhinged songs of that's just like only a child could write, like
Mhm.
talking about like going to the grocery store and like and getting soda. Like it was crazy. But that uh as small as it seemed, I started to really fall in love with this bigger picture thing of like capturing music and
Mhm.
capturing what I was doing at that moment, putting it into GarageBand or putting it onto like a voice memo on a phone or something like that. And I think um, more than just writing music, what I was able to do was catalog my ideas and being familiar with that. So like I would just make hella beats on GarageBand for like years when I was like 13, 14. Just this huge catalog of just like hundreds of beats that I would just like throw on my iPod Nano and go around and listen to that and be like, damn, I'm about to be the best beat maker ever. Like, and they were all bad, but it was all like a learning thing. It's like every time it's like, oh, and now I understand this about rhythm. I didn't know, but that taught me how to program drums. And it taught me how to interact with harmony, like
Mhm.
with chords and bass notes and realize song structure before I even realized what I was interacting with,
Mhm.
but realizing, oh, here's when the bass comes in. Here's where it's bigger. And it's like, oh, here's where it's more cymbals. That's a verse. That's a chorus. Like this shit, like just taught me all this stuff without even me realizing it. And just having that in the box, in the computer, on my mom's work laptop. Like that was the thing that ended up changing everything for me, where I could just do it, and I fell in love
Mhm.
with just recording music. And it almost brings full circle though what we were talking about at the beginning, like Idle Empire. Like I would try to track all our stuff in GarageBand and do all that shit, and all of it sounded bad, but it was always a step to the next thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've always kind of wondered like what your background musically was. Just because a lot of your songs are, I think, kind of just the perfect balance of like musically interesting to someone that's into music, especially a lot of people in the emo scene, I do feel like are like kind of more of like the technical side of music, like the theory nerds or
Yeah,
whatever.
for sure.
And I mean, with the way that math rock and stuff and the math rock influences in emo are, that's kind of bound to happen. But at the same time, a lot of your songs are still like I could show my friend that has no clue what, any of that is, and they'll still be like, that's a digestible song. Like the song
Yeah.
structure and the hooks are like what pull you into it as someone that doesn't really dig into that. So I kind of feel like, yeah, the Origami Angel formula is kind of like the perfect balance between those two things.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Like that's always kind of like been, I feel like a byproduct of what we do, where it's just like um from being around it, like trying to be, but obviously like being around the scene has like been a very important thing for me for as long as I've been in it. So it's always gonna have that texture. It's always gonna be coated with that stuff. Um, but then also I just feel like the shit that I liked and the shit that Pat likes outside of it is like, music. It's just all
Mhm.
music, know?
Yeah.
Um, all this band is just a great big um, combination of every influence that we've had in one way or another, the smallest or the biggest. So I'd always be
Yeah.
happy to hear stuff like that. Like people will come to a show and be like, someone who's very in the scene, like likes all the emo bands, math rock, heavy shit, and they're like, "Yeah, this is awesome." Blah blah blah. Like, oh, like and I brought my mom here and she loves you, or my brought my dad or my uncle. That's the stuff where I'm like, this is amazing. Or vice versa. What's kind of starting to happen now is like, um, people who are like just starting to have like kids and stuff, or like a kid who's like 7, and they're like, one of those like pop punk emo adults that's like 37 and like is in the shit and in the scene, but they're like, oh, but my 5-year-old, 7-year-old kid loves your music, and that's just like, I'm thinking like they could be listening to what's the band for the kids, not the Wiggles. It's like
Oh, not
oh,
is it Yo Gabba Gabba or something or
Yo Gabba Gabba. That's what
yeah.
I'm saying. The kids could be listening to Yo Gabba Gabba, but they're listening to Gami. That's the type of shit that really makes me happy. Like,
Yeah. I guess kind of going off that a little bit. Are there any bands right now that you're listening to that like really inspire you, or I guess that you just want to give a shout or anything?
yeah, sure. I mean, this is a thing that always think about, and I always feel bad where I'm like, there's so much on my mind that I listen to so much of it. I always give shouts to everyone is crushing it in the DIY scene. Just the overall, the emo scene, the indie scene, hardcore scene, everybody's crushing it right now. Everybody's doing a great job. And every show I go to is awesome. Specifically like shout outs to Aren't We Amphibians? I think those guys are crushing it right now. There's hella bands in the DIY emo that I just feel like every time I do one of these, I'm like, I'm leaving out 100 that I should be shouting out. Like shout out to like Guac. That's a band I think is awesome. Um, it's one of those things. But the local scene here in the DMV is still doing great. Cooney, Abacot, such a fire band. We have bands Echo Astral is popping off right now. Pretty Bitter, Combat. DC's in a great spot right now. Just a lot of really, really cool bands. DC, DMV, Baltimore, all that
Yeah.
shit. But in a grander scheme, like of stuff outside of the scene that's like been very inspiring to me recently is like the most recent Porter Robinson record has kind of been like it's definitely my album of the year. It's crazy, like I've always known who that was,
Hmm.
like since like for the last 10 years, but I never really dove too deep into a record until this last album. And our front house engineer Drew was just like, dude, have you heard this album yet? Like it's whatever. And like it's dope. I was like, oh yeah, I'll check it out. So I was editing drums for a band I was producing, and so I was just like comping through some stuff and doing some fades. And in the background, I was like, I'm gonna throw this record on because I don't really have to listen to these drums right now. Um, and I was just like, okay, first 2 songs, kind of bangers. Third song, hold up, this is amazing. I was like, this is like a life changing album to me, and I just didn't expect to have it. I immediately ran it back and was like, this is crazy. Flash forward last week, I posted his cover that I did at one of his tracks, and he like responded on Twitter and was like, "Yo, I like your band," and I was like, this is insane to me. This is like a famous guy, like.
Yeah,
So like that's a insane thing. But that's a place I'm drawing a lot of just like personal inspiration. Like I think I'm very like personally attached to that record. And just seeing all that stuff and yeah, that's really cool to see. But a real shit, like all the DIY scene is crushing it. They're always crushing it, but right now it's in a beautiful space. I'm really just like proud to have roots in that scene and still be involved, still be a part of it.
for sure. Any advice for people, I guess, that are like trying to, revitalize a scene or maybe get a scene started in their town?
Yeah, dog, it's crazy. Like, I think about this with DC a lot, especially with emo, because when we were starting, it was like the emo thing had kind of had its thing and was sort of like a little lower than it had been in the past. And there was like 4 or 5 bands that was all around the DMV, like all around the Beltway area for DC, and we were on every show. Like that was just like how it was. Like 3 of the 5 or 4 of the 5 were on every local show that ever happened, and it was like, okay, this is awesome, but it's very small. But people are starting to come. But as more people came, then you start to see more bands pop up, and like you see it all over the place. But now, like a lot of these kids are in emo bands, and it's like, okay, well, we were on the tail end of what was started before us and then we were starting something kind of new,
Hmm.
and then now this new generation has come in and been on the tail end of that, and now they're starting this newer thing that's even bigger. It's hard to really see the scope of it, but I think at the end of the day, like you just have to be willing to like to fight for it. You know, you just got to
Mhm.
be willing to go out there and show people that it's a good time. There's going to be lots of shows. If there's an area where there's not really a lot, going on, there's going to be shows where there's two people, maybe there's none. It sucks, but like it's a thing that every scene has gone through, and eventually that type of shit will catch on, and you see scenes that were almost non-existent start to pop up. It all goes through these
Mhm.
waves, but I wish I had better advice, but like be a good person with good people and do good things. And
Yeah.
I think good things always happen.
Yeah. Which is kind of crazy too, like how you mentioned, I guess if we want to put like labels on it or whatever, like kind of the tail end
Yeah.
of fourth wave that turned into fifth wave, which is I guess I think where a lot of people might put Gami. Um
Yeah.
I think like the fourth wave stuff, a lot of people it was pretty underground, right? Like and not in the like haha my music's underground way, but like not as many people, even a big band, Front Bottoms, Modern Baseball, not that many people
Yeah.
outside of the scene really know them. But now I feel like you can kind of mention some of those bigger bands in the scene and more people in just like the mainstream, I think are starting to listen to like the emo stuff, which is kind of really cool to see that like people are listening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, am old enough to remember what it was like in 2015 and
Mhm.
2016. And while these bands are, a lot of those bands, like the fourth wave or whatever, which was relatively underground at the time, it was still bigger than how some stuff had been in the past, but the scene was not what it is today. And but those bands are now as big as they've ever been. A lot of bands that are broken up.
Mhm.
Like even you see bands that like maybe they're not in the emo scene, but you look at like a Title Fight, and it's
Mhm.
like that is band is as big as they've ever been. Super Heaven, not a broken up band, but a band that hasn't made an album in 10 years is as big as they've ever been. Mobo is as big as they ever been. Front Bottoms as big as they ever been, just because of like the way that it's evolved. And I
Mhm.
think that the fifth wave has pushed a lot of that stuff, but I think it's also kind of still been on the coattails. It's all coming up together, right?
Mhm.
Where I think that there are a lot of people who found out about this this wave of the late fourth wave stuff, the hotelier, the modern baseballs, the front bottom era. And people were like, where did this go? You find out
Mhm.
about it and it's falling apart. And so people say, oh, well, no, check out Glass Beach, check out Cool Kids, check out Aren't We Amphibians, Guitar Freight from Fooly Cooley. Check out, any of these fourth wave, fifth wave, like tweener band, like whoever is bridging that gap,
Yeah.
and it's bringing it all up. Like the fifth wave is bringing up the fourth wave, the fourth wave is bringing up the fifth wave, and it's kind of weird to see. Like I'm like for a long time that like being in a twinkly emo music, I didn't know anybody who fucked with that. But then like there's a show I went to recently. It was the Arms Length tour, the Wax
Oh,
Bodega
nice.
tour, the
Yeah.
headliner, and seeing that and just being like, this is beautiful. Like so many people like emo music. I saw Saturday's Year Place with Prince Daddy and was just like they one of their tracks, there's just like this twinkly guitar part. And I was just like, this is amazing to see. Like this is a band that is pretty fresh, right? Like they're not like 10 years old. They're like a newer band, and there's a whole, a sold out crowd in Baltimore that is going crazy for them on a show where they're direct support. And that's just like where emo music has come to. Um, it's it's nuts, but it's fucking awesome. It's it's
Yeah.
it's awesome to see. It at first it was just jarring. I did not realize how much it's grown passively just from word of mouth, but it's really awesome. I'm just really excited for what it means for everybody, for our whole genre of music.
Mhm. Yeah, because like kind of an aside, but like I remember when I was starting college, several years ago, no one would have a clue what any of these bands are. It's like, oh, who's your favorite band? And it's like, oh, like like Pool Kids or Gami or P Daddy or whatever. And the people are like, oh, who's that? And they'll listen to it and they'll be like, oh shit, that's really cool, but they just have no idea. But by the
Mm.
time I graduated, there were people, they'd stop by the house, or whatever, and see a record, and they'd be like, "Oh shit, that's like now that's what I call like music volume 420 or some shit." Like that used to kind of be a deep cut. Now just people know what it is, which is
Yep,
really a
everything.
cool thing to see.
Yeah, and that's like another band. Like, there's leaders in this genre, like bands that have gotten ridiculously big, whether it be Mom Jeans, Hot Mulligan, but like that stuff existing is like, paving a way for a lot of other people to grab other attention that's out there. There's a lot of attention,
Yeah.
that exists, and it's crazy, but I'm just like I feel really lucky. I've seen times where this genre of music and relatively adjacent genres of music just didn't pop the way that it's popping right now. Um, I'm just like, very grateful to be in this time, very grateful to be a part of it all. And just as grateful to as a fan to like to listen to great music come out and see it be appreciated by everybody.
Kind of a switch up, but I think something that would be really interesting to people is, do you have any like favorite stories from tour or like favorite venue story, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Damn, there's something a little too crazy. Not really, like I'm not a wild guy, but something I love that I think changed because of something that happened that I was a part of in a venue. So there's the Palladium in Worcester, Massachusetts. It's like their big venue there. It's like 2,700 cap in the big room. And it was the biggest show of the first tour back that Mom Jeans did. We were direct support.
Mhm.
Save Face was on there, the tour, and Pool Kids was on tour. And what ended up happening was we played, me and Caden from Pool Kids are just hanging out after the show. Before loadout, it's like I think at this point, Mom Jeans is finishing up, and we watched a lot of their set on this couch that was backstage, like on stage, but
Oh
just
shit.
behind it. And it was like, damn, this is crazy. There's probably video of like me and Caden just being there, being like, this is crazy. But we eventually went back and we like went up. I had noticed that there was a bathroom that had these stairs that went up to like an attic or like a ladder. And I was like, dude, we gotta go check that shit out. Like, we have to go check this shit out. And so we went up to this ladder and we found out like there's it's an old building. It's like from the 1910s. So this has got like like we found this huge industrial like fan and like that like used to be their air coolant thing. Like they
Yeah.
used to like pour water on it. That's how you see air conditioned buildings. But then we went up there and there was like crazy. There's like cans of Four Loco, everything everywhere. And it was deep and it was like 20 feet drops and stuff. And we just fucked around up there for a while. But then we went and then after the show, it was like Mom Jean's biggest show ever. So all of them were like chilling out in the green room. And then Brad, who's like their agent, was there. And I went to go say what's up to Brad. And I was like, dude, you'll never believe it, man. So there's this guy with him. I was like, man, I just went upstairs. Like, I just found this old fucking attic. Like, we were fucking around. Like, me and Caden got on this fan. It was fucked up. Like, it felt like we were going to fall through the building, fall on the stage and die. And then he was like, oh, you probably shouldn't be saying that because this dude that I'm with right now is actually the guy who owns this building. And then I was just like, what's up, bro? I was just kidding. Um, but so then the next time we got to play there, I went up to that same bathroom to see it, and it was sealed off. And I was like, damn, they actually found out that I did that, or maybe someone else did it. But maybe, butterfly effect. Now no one can experience that again, but it was awesome. And
That's
clearly
super.
somebody else enjoyed it up there too, because there was hella beer up there and shit. So that was crazy. But that's like not that cool. That's just like should show you how lame I am that that's like a cool story of mine.
Well,
Um
that's a pretty sick story. I mean, a lot of people don't get to like hear that kind of shit about the venue, so I think people will enjoy that.
yeah. I'm trying to think like of certain things. Um this is a fun one I probably shouldn't share. Actually, no, I don't give a shit. Another Massachusetts venue, Roadrunner, super cool. Just awesome, huge venue, microwave headlined there. We were the direct support for them. And so there's all this nice stuff in that area. It's like a crazy bougie area. And it's like they give you a coupon to basically be like, oh, you can spend this on food, you can spend this on whatever. And they give you like two 20% coupons. And one of the stores it works for is a New Balance store. And so what ended up happening is I went to New Balance and I was like, oh, I gotta get a pair of New Balance. That's like a DMV shoe, like a Maryland
Yeah.
shoe, like that worked. And it's bigger than that, but it's like it means something different here. It's like that means you're wise and like you're part of the shit. So I was like, I gotta get a pair. I haven't had New Balance since I was in like 11th grade. So shit, I'll do it. I get these New Balance with this 20% off. So I got a pretty decent pair of New Balance, but I'm like, you know what, this tour is kind of crushing it. So like, let's do it. So one person's coming to check me out, puts in a 20% coupon, hands it back to me. And I'm like, shit. And then he's like, wait, I gotta go get my manager to help me out with this. If y'all at New Balance hear this, I'm just kidding. This is a joke. But the manager comes back and I'm like, yeah, I got this coupon. And then he applies another of the same discount to the same thing and also gives me the coupon back.
Shit.
So I was like, hell yeah. So I got these shits for like 37% off instead of 27 or 20. And then I get the shoe and I'm like, I still got two coupons. So I was like, all right, well, I'm about to get 20% off lunch and 20% off some other shit. So they give out these coupons, but not everybody checks to give to, make sure that, But really, I don't care. I'll take whatever from whoever. So that was pretty cool. That was fun. Um, but it's so crazy. Like I'm such a like a lame. Like when I get to the venue, I don't do anything. I literally stay in the same room. People were saying on that tour, like the guys in Heart Attack Man would be like right next to us in the green room or we'd share sometimes, and they'd be like, I can always count on you. I know if no one's in the green room, you're gonna be in there because I just don't like to leave. I like to get in my vibe, chill before the show. Once the doors hit, put on a fit, and then just like mentally lock in, start warming up my voice, and then do the show. Like that. That's just like the flow. So I wish I had like more crazy stories where everyone else involved is probably, oh, we did this before the show, we did this and that. I'm just like, I don't know, dude. I was playing on the Steam Deck. Yeah, it's so funny. Like, I've always been like part of it, a bigger, like what I would call like a nerdier music group of like people who kind of were just locked in on emo music or music as a whole. And I was always like, I definitely am, but I was like, unfortunately, none of these people have been cursed with fucking with sports the way that I do. So I'd just be like, ah, and they'd be like, oh, we don't care. But then when I started touring with more people, those are the people like who really fuck with sports. And I was just like,
Yeah.
damn, where are you guys? My whole life, dude. I thought emo people hated this shit. But I'm like, dude, like, just anyone I could get really like nitty gritty with it about whether it's basketball or baseball, like just that's particularly those two because I can really dig in. And I've met like Heart Attack Man as a group of guys who are like the guitarist and drummer of that band, Adam and Ty, like we would just chop up about baseball, and I just feel like this is awesome. Like this is the type that's what I do at shows. Like
Yeah.
I don't do anything crazy and the venues don't affect me. I just literally find my homies and I'm like, how the Cleveland Guardians doing? You? Oh, you guys got good bullpen. Oh, Class A is my favorite reliever. You know, stuff like that. It's not as cool as it seems, but or as like you would expect a show to be. But
Yeah.
it is what it is.
No, I mean, I guess also one time I think it was you guys, and I think this was the Pink Shift tour, Ace of Cups.
Oh
I
yeah,
was like, ah shit, I drove like 6 hours to that show.
you're real.
Skipped my final. Yeah, if that professor happens to see that shit, I was definitely very sick.
Yeah, that's
Anyways,
what I'm saying.
rolled up to the shop. I'm like, ah, shit, I'm starved. I gotta grab something to eat. So I'm like, oh, there's a Taco Bell right by the venue. Let me roll up to there. Rolled up to there, and I guess it was you and some like just random dude that was talking about like just NBA basketball. And I'm like, oh shit,
Yeah,
this is
some
like,
guy was borderline punishing me about
yeah,
football and
it was
basketball.
like some random dude was like asking you like the stat lines and shit about like whatever was going on. And I was
Yeah.
like, and then you dropped like the hardest show I've ever seen. That
Yeah, that was a fun one. That was a fun show for sure. That was crazy. I forgot about that. That was definitely something that happened. I'm
yeah,
glad there's
which is just
eyewitness to that.
that's yeah, kind of just reminded me of that, but really, really funny shit.
That's sick.
If there's anything you want to say to people about like the new record or anything, definitely can go ahead and throw that in there.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we got a new record, Feeling I Found coming out September 27th. We also are touring with some awesome bands, Arm's Length, Forests from Singapore, and our homies Max Seal. So yeah, if you want to see some dope rock music, some dope emo music, any of it, it'll all be there. Um, come say what up, hang out, talk to us about sports or Pokemon or just listen to the music. It's all good. Check out the record if you want to.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Ryland from Origami Angel, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me.